there were so many ideas that were thrown up by these 4 presentations that I just thought that I would kick off with a few questions. And please, all of you, feel free to answer whichever one of you feels ripe to answer the particular question. I do think that we have reached a kind of ripeness, and that ideas do have to reach a sort of ripeness to be more widely disseminated. And I think that that really was shown a few weeks ago. I don't know how many of you saw Bruce Pascoe on my favourite show, Gardening Australia, talking about kangaroo grass and about how nutritious kangaroo grass is, and how Aboriginal people had made damper out of this grass, and this grass is treated as a weed these days. It's very difficult to harvest and mill. But I think that when you see Bruce Pascoe talking about kangaroo grass on Gardening Australia, there's something is happening.
Carolyn, I feel so grateful to be alive now in Australia, and the message from my dad was resilience. It's certainly standing up. And he saw that the art industry, Aboriginal art industry that Dad founded, was something that Aboriginal people would always own, and it was always a great industry for people to be able to participate on community. And that was all we did. We just used my dad's model of significant mentorship. And so I can see that this food that we have will bring people in the same way to the table together to have those calm discussions about how we can work together for the future. It's very simple. It's simple,
but it is also quite a challenge and quite complicated. And I think that, the pioneers that I talked about before, like the Kirschers, found that there was what they called an ick factor, and there was what John Newton, I think you say Jean-Paul Brunetot, called an experience, an element, a degree of food racism that manifested in that people rejected the kind of witchetty grubs that they thought that's what Indigenous food was, and they didn't want to know. They didn't want to try it. So how do we get past that prejudice now, today?
When we first started Outback Pride in 2001, we felt the best way to support remote communities was to make value-added products that had long shelf life, and to make it really simple, not terribly testicle at all. If you've got Kwong jam on the label, it's bloody Kwong jam. And so it was important to get that taste factor out there. But now, of course, the public want to have the leaf. They want to actually taste what it's like fresh. And so that's why we're sort of very deeply involved with Outback Pride Fresh, which is the production side of it. But first up in 2001, we were suffering greatly from nice chap that he is, Les Hiddens with the funny hat, the bush tucker man. And he really gave you the impression that you wouldn't want to eat this shit out in the bush. You'd have to be dying if you ate that. And he'd take, army survivalists, say, oh yeah, come out here, cook this with a rock and then throw that out and eat the rock. So it was really hard work to come face to face with that. And so we've met so many heroes to us, like Kylie, and lots of you people out here that take the risk with the food and present it in such a very respectful way to bring First Nation peoples with the food.
I was wondering, Palisa, whether you'd like to say a little bit more, just elaborate on the thing that we talked about last week, about this kind of simpatico element of flavour between the Southern Thai food and the Indigenous foods that you're growing and experimenting with now.
Certainly. Let's start off with today. I learned from Gail here that there's a native basil, which is literally akin to holy basil, which we grow and cultivate on our farm. The fragrance, the aroma, the texture of it is almost identical. And as Gail has said, it was possibly brought over.
It was brought over to outback Queensland by early spice traders, as the same as the Rosella had been, but this is pre-European contact.
But Dr. Rod Drew, who was the chair of the ISMS, he's the tropical fruit chair, kind of international body, he's a horticulturalist up in far north Queensland. I remember going to a symposium where he said that, the same species occur here in Australia, especially the far north Queensland, Darwin area, that occur all along Thailand and the southern parts of Thailand, all the way up to middle Thailand, and also Malaysia and Indonesia. And I just thought, at that light bulb moment, wow, that's why I can totally relate to this food that the bush foods that we eat here.
It's not just that, it's a good old samphire that they've been pickling and eating in Europe and England for hundreds and hundreds of years. There is a joining of those subspecies, but they have adapted in Australia. Yes.
All the different ficuses, the
There's a lot of things.
myrtaceae, which is the little pillies, which is actually relative to the wax jambu. All these trees are, they're very familiar to my flavour profile palette anyway, because I grew up eating this. And so the astringency, the bitterness, the harsh, I love it. They're very full flavours and they're very relatable to, our Thai cuisine. It's medicinal. You've got to eat it in small quantities, but it makes up a whole, which is extremely fulfilling.
I wanted to ask you, Nicole, what you think is the narrative that we need to sort of get the story of this kind of food, this kind of conversation tonight out, that's been kind of missing from the dialogue so far, because one of the things that John Newton mentions in his book is a Malaysian report that says that communities that share food, that sharing food is a way of bridging all sorts of gaps of misunderstanding, and that ethnicities that share each other's food live more harmoniously together. Have you got any thoughts about that, both in terms of your sort of creative part of your life and your legal part of your life?
That's such a good question. I, for the last few days, have had my head buried in Dark Emu and The Biggest Estate on Earth. And for those of you who have not read those books, I would urge you to, because they are brilliant. And the message that comes very clearly from both books is that in order to know this place, in order to become an Australian, you actually need to know the land. And the people who mastered this over several thousands of years are Aboriginal people. So in order for us to truly become Australians, we have to actually appreciate Aboriginal knowledge systems. And the genius of Aboriginal knowledge systems is just truly remarkable. And I think that I simply can't reduce the incredible words in both books on the podium tonight, but I would urge all of you to read those books.
Uncle Max, would there be a particular food? You talked about the fish, and you talked about the spearing of the fish, and you talked about the gathering of the berries once you've shaken the tree 3 times. Is there a particular food from your childhood growing up that you remember as the most delicious taste? Was there one particular thing that you loved to eat from the bush tucker that you would share with us tonight?
Yes, there is. There's heaps. There's just heaps of stuff, too numerous to mention. You got different berries, you got different saps of trees, you got different leaves, you got different grasses and roots of grasses. So that's all your vegetation stuff, and some of the sweetest witchetty grubs come from the bottom of the Australian wattle. Once you start digging around there, if you look at a wattle tree that looks like if it's all done and got all that brown stuff coming out, that's the land talking to you, and it's telling you, bust me open and you'll have food. I'm a cupboard. Yeah. And so you get those witchetty grubs out of there, and you just put them on a bit of, for people who would go, yuck, I don't want to eat that moving thing. But once you put that on a hot plate and just roll it like that and put it between a bit of bread and butter, you don't have to use butter because it becomes butter. It becomes a butter and a cheese. And here you have this wonderful thing that people will screw their faces up at, and because there's the old just the old eel, that greedy, slimy old eel, but what a nutritious thing that is, and how you get it, how you catch it, you just it's a wonderful meat, to be able to eat. But look, cooking fish, you don't have to gut a fish or scale a fish. All you do is just ask the earth for a bit of clay, pat the clay all around it, stick it in the fire, and when you think it's cooked, just open all the coals up and tap the fish with a stick. If it's hard, you're right. So you just pull the fish out, open the crust, and all the scales are gone, and the gut is about as big as your little fingernail. See? So the hard work has gone out of a simple way of cooking. But to give that taste, you just grab a couple of leaves, or probably just a grass or something or other. You just stick that leaves within the first, and then all the clays around it, and stick it in. You can cook a lot of stuff like that. See, it's such a wonderful way in doing it, because once you see the land talking to you, that there's plenty of food around.
That's why you call it nature's supermarket.
That's why I call it the supermarket.
Nature's supermarket.
Yeah. So once you go
That's
out,
right.
once you go out into the supermarket, you're looking high level, or you're looking down. See, it's not like when you're walking around in Woolies, you've got to look up the aisle like that and run into some poor creature with your trolley.
And your supermarket never closes.
No, you just keep walking, and you look down, and the land is telling you. See, your land tells you where the food is.
Yes.
The land tells you what fish are moving. See?
Yeah.
And just all those simple little things like that, people say, we better go and get some fish. Now look here, this fella here is showing us. And when I say this fella and that fella, see, that's the relationship we have with the land. That's the relationship we have with the plant life and the trees. So own the land, and I don't mean, own it with money, but own it with spirit and soul.
And knowledge.
And acknowledge it. Let it know what you're doing. Don't rape it. Don't rape it and destroy it. It's there to provide us with things. And once we do these kind of things, then we decide to till, knock the tree down, till the land, and rape the land, and then go through all the trauma, going bankrupt, for trying to grow things to get rich. We only need to grow food to feed our hunger. Right?
Gail, can you just talk a little bit about, this is sort of one end of the story, and then another part of the story with you, which is about the supply, the foodways in terms of the growing of the food in the remote communities and at Outback Pride, and how it gets to the restaurants. Can you just explain that kind of connection?
We really rely on the support of the chefs. Thank you, guys, for buying our product, because we can then put that resource back into our bushwork. As you know, we've put a lot of this in, but it's about...
That's calling it give it away to keep it. you know. That's my
You're probably
simple,
right, Uncle.
yeah.
You're probably
See,
right.
yeah,
I've always
see?
felt that it's child abuse to leave your money to your children. What you have to do is leave them resilience and ability to make their own way in life. But if you
Live in a
measure
minority,
everything...
darling, live
Yeah.
a minority.
Yeah, and so if you value your life on money, you need to feed your soul in different ways. But yes, with us, our bushwork is very particular, and we talk a lot about capacity building more than anything else. And we're very philosophical about what happens. We don't impose our stories on any communities. We get asked very clearly, and we go and see the people and meet them first and see if we feel that they really want to do the work or whether they're just being told by the bureaucrat to do the work. And so, yes, we make friends out on community. And so the last 6 weeks, I guess we've driven 10,000 kilometres, which is normal for us. Mike is 70, and we've just cut back to 60 hours a week because we're going slow now. And yes, we realise that it's getting more difficult to do that. Our nursery, Reedy Creek Nursery, 4-hour drive from Adelaide, we have to plant 3,000 plus seedlings every week there to keep our supply chain of fresh leaf going. We handpick 50 tonne a year and send out to you wonderful friends. And we employ a lot of people there, including First Nations people. But our bushwork has to be specifically about making things relevant to them. If we drive 2.5 days to get to Clara Hart community, which is 100 kilometres north of Burke, we're not going to be able to supply fresh product from them. And so the products from the bush have to be fruits that can be dried or snap frozen and long-term crops for them. If you're one of those wonderful people that follow me on Outback Pride Fresh Instagram, you'll see that we've started the harvest of the Cutchera or bush tomato at Clara Hart. And in amongst that, we've planted quandong trees, which are a long story. And so that's what it has to be about, capacity building for the future and for the young people to be able to carry this forward. But we called the business Outback Pride because the young children and people that I played with in the 1950s eating these were more literate and numerate than the people of today. And I find it a total shame to our whole society that this is happening. And so we're focusing on education for people and to build an industry where remote communities can access, the same way as the art industry, where people can access a fully fledged industry that is totally HACCP certified and a very slick supply chain. And a lot of our wonderful friends contact me often and say, well, can you just get me a box to my restaurant at, back of Uluru or wherever? And I have to very politely let them down, because if I'm taking one little box to a restaurant anywhere, I'm on the road to bankruptcy, because I'm not concentrating on the actual production of the product that we're giving. And we understand a very basic model of business, and we talk to the people out on community about this. 50% of your business has to be on some sort of creation, some sort of production. 50%, the other 50% has to be to fill in those dots for government, the work cover, superannuation, all of those things that you need to do, all of the paperwork and the marketing, the getting the word to the public. So for some of these remote communities, their whole effort is put into providing the production of the plants that we've taken to them and shown them how to manage them. And so we bring their product, pay them top dollar for that, back into the central place at Reedy Creek, and then, sort of package it under our HACCP system and send it out with the bigger supply chain. And so that's, saving them the worry of individual marketing and promotion. But yes, I say kindly to our friends, leave us to do this really important work, and we send pallets to our distributors, and it's up to the distributors to run the boxes to you. We can't do that.
Okay, I get a sense that you will have plenty of questions to ask. So if you've got a question for our speakers, raise your hand and we will find you in the dark and we will bring a microphone to you, I believe. So has someone got a question that they would like to address to anyone on the panel? John, are you still here? Yes. Have you got a particular question that you were going to ask? Because I was going to ask you about, you have a wonderful idea, a really positive idea about how we could change Australia Day into something different, which is sort of modelled on the American idea of Thanksgiving and is about us sharing the abundance of this land and eating together. I was wondering whether that was something you might like to comment on or expand or elaborate on, if we can get a microphone to you.
I have a microphone.
Excellent.
I sort of went off that idea. It sounded a little bit like white fellas telling black fellas what to do. I learned from somebody called Madaru Walbidi a wonderful phrase, walking together. We have to walk together and we have to eat together and we have to work together. So it's got to be something that's been done, it has to be done across the two cultures. So I think it's a good idea. I think the basic idea came from the thought that we could sit down at a table and eat together and eat food together, and it's always a good way to learn about each other's cultures. But it's got to come somehow from a place which is mutual rather than, from one side.
Did you have a question for anyone on the panel, or would you like to pass your microphone on?
I'll pass my microphone. I haven't got
Okay.
any questions. I've been fascinated by listening to all of you and sitting next to Amy Chanter, who I didn't know so much about.
Someone else got the microphone?
Thank you very much. This is a question for Uncle Max. I'm just curious, we're talking about Indigenous foods here tonight, and there was a conversation around interrelatedness and the importance of that in terms of the sacred with Indigenous culture. So my question to you, in what we've talked about and listened to tonight, where does the cultivation of Indigenous foods for European or non-European people to bring into their food and their diets, where does that sit with the sacred? And what are your thoughts and feelings on that?
Yeah, that sits on the land. You're taking it as the land. And that's where the food grows. See, the mother gives birth to everything, and people don't realise that. Once we start to learn about where our foods come on and start to look at it, so like you nurture and that. See, I have something. I have a plan even that people are destroying. But if someone came and sat down and sat at a square table with me, not the round table, but at a square table with me, I can talk about the land that has been overused and abused, but I got stuff that could go there and grow there to revitalise that. See, and instead of getting these what I don't know if they're chemicals or whatever they are to stick into the land to grow, there's natural stuff. See. The land talks to us. The land is the greatest teacher of all. So we've got to sit and really look at this land and have that respect for the land and communicate. See, and you communicate with your eyes to what's there. And this is why I talk about, this is when I talk about that sacredness and that respect. So it's very important you go deeper into your communication with this wonderful thing that we call Earth. See, we've got to stop a lot of this brainy thinking, putting this on to make our things grow. We got natural things. And I was only talking to my niece about this tonight. We got natural things to be able to put there and grow and then put our seeds and our plants and that. See, we can use that. Then we can put it in other lands or other soils and that, where people say that won't grow there, that won't grow there. You know, I've got something that I can put in, it'll grow there all right. You know, and this is the kind of thing that'll give the plant life, and your food's a good thing to grow. So, but it'll be only for the indigenous foods and that. I'm not looking to do commercial stuff. If someone is fair dinkum enough to sit down with me and really talk, I have 2 ears. And I got an 82-year-old brain that can listen a little bit. So yeah, so I'll do those things, you know. See, it's about what you put in there, what you put into the earth, how you do it. This Pascal fella, I'm teaching him. He's my student, for goodness sake, you know. And yeah.
Students.
Yeah, we are all your
We
students.
are all your students. Can I thank you for that question. That was very relevant and certainly
Thank you,
very dear to my heart.
Did I give you an answer?
Yeah, very
Thank you.
dear. Yeah, and so I'm incredibly grateful not only for my father teaching me about resilience, but also teaching me about appropriate and generational engagement respectfully with First Nations people. So there's a lot of politics involved with how to approach people in right way. Uncle, you'll back me up on that. And so, which I was taught very carefully. So, for example, out in the Pitjantjatjara lands, where the place has been raped, my uncle's terminology, by white mismanagement, when we were asked to go in and sit down with communities, we did just that. I sat in the dirt and we spoke to people over many visits, because you don't just do the white fella thing and come in and point. Hey fellas, you go and do, you know, this is what government workers do. They say, fellas, you go and do agriculture over there, and then they go away in their shiny cruisers and come back 12 months later and said, nothing there. You're bloody useless, aren't you? And so instead of doing that, we would find out from people what their sacred plants were, and they are never grown on that community, but they're preserved. And a lot of the community members said they felt that the white foragers were very disrespectful, coming into their country and picking things without permission. And I've always said to them, the thing that is your part of your Mother Earth belongs to you for community use. But if you want to have a project so that your young fellas can have a job, we set it up like inside a fence, like a white fella job, so that it's not, you know, sort of mistaken for taking the natural stands. And that's really, really important.
Can I just add to that? So I think the sacred is also extremely universal, right? Like it's applicable everywhere. It's a mentality and a way of approaching your life and your lifestyle, and waste and conservatism being on the land has really taught me so much of that, and it was a big decision for us to take the cows off the land. So the cows have been off the land for a year, and since that year, we've just noticed everything growing back and cleaning up itself. Like the riparian waterway has just run clear again, and there are eels in there. The callistemons are coming up. And, you know, in fairness for the government, they do good things. Landcare has come on board and volunteered funds so that we could replant, you know, native species again. So we can put native bees down. Well, we've got native bees on the farm, but for native bee production, honey production. I think the sacred is in all of us, and we are extremely responsible to practice that awareness every day. What we eat, how we choose to tread, what we grow, what we can. It's so easy to destroy, a lot harder to grow and to maintain.
Another question. Have we got someone?
Hello. Oh, I've got a microphone here. I've got a microphone over here on your right. Hi. My question is, how do we scale up? So here we are in Sydney, moving towards doubling of the population by 2050, towards a megacity of 10 million people. Yeah. We're eroding Cumberland Plain, which are the ecological systems of which our Indigenous knowledge food systems are gathered from. Our peri-urban landscape here only supports 20% of the perishable foods that we get in the supermarket. So when we walk in the door, only 20% of those foods already come from the metropolitan area. The rest are from other regional areas. How do we bring the ideas of Gail, Palika, Uncle Max, how do we bring that to the Aurora Nation within the boundaries of the Hawkesbury, the Nepean and the Georges River to create a true Indigenous, ecological, sustainable food network for this mega city by mid-century?
Can I go? Sorry. Another thing I'm incredibly passionate about is, upskilling the industry. I was devastated when I realised that it took 40 years from when my father started working on the abattoir industry for the federal government to actually stand up and support it as a proper industry. So that's the catch-22 in this. You actually need to get many ethical growers that engage with their local First Nations people to start. And I mean, it could start in this room, that you all go away with passion. I love the whole idea where restaurants have their kitchen garden, and you should grow more native foods in your kitchen garden. I know, are you a chef or are you a gardener? It's hard to kind of break that down if you don't have a lovely daughter like this. Yeah, but yes, just that will and intent of people to be a foundation of industry that is cemented by ethics. That is just so important. And I give you my love for that, if you want to keep going on that story.
Gail, one of the things that you told me on the phone last week was that whenever you apply for federal government funding for a bush tucker officer in communities, you get turned down. And yet, the parallel that you make with art is so interesting, because now it's a given that we know that most remote Indigenous communities will have an art officer, and you're arguing for the same thing for bush tucker. Why is it not happening?
We gave up on the whole federal government thing in just before 2008, when they were just not interested in the bush, tragically. And we were putting a lot of proposals forward to the government to have a bush tucker officer on community standing next to the arts officer, which was the model of my dad. And government is generally okay about building a few fences, a little bit of low infrastructure, but they won't give jobs. So we realised, you never sit around and whinge about something. You just get up and you do it. And so we focused on you lovely people, knowing that we would be able to grow the critical mass in the industry more if you wonderful heroes are interpreting native foods in such a respectful way that it will become more mainstream. So there's a catch-22 here in this. You need the bulk for it to be a proper industry covered by proper food safety regulations to fit into modern food society, but you also need the plants in the ground. And you can get the occasional little plant from a retail nursery, but you know, we know full and well if we're going to keep producing the amount of fresh leaf we have to you know, select seed and plants before for us to be able to just plant that sort of quantity every week. If you grow a carrot in your commercial farm, organic and beautifully, you still send off to the seed merchant and you buy so many kilos of that particular carrot. You can't do that in the native food industry. Sorry.
So much for closing the gap, eh, when you talk about that, talk about the government, you know?
Yeah.
Eh? How is that, you know? Closing the gap. They're closing the gap, all right. They're closing the gap on the industries that has not been propagated. I got an auntie over here who's probably got an answer or a question for you who's been in the industry for about 50 years. You know, my sister girl over here. You know, tell them, sis, what you've been in.
Where's Kylie Kwong? First of all, I'd like to thank Kylie. Kylie's part of my family. And Paul and her mum. And Lisa. And John. I'm Auntie Beryl, everybody. Known as Auntie Beryl. I've been in Redfern for the past 50-odd years, right? I came from a small country town when I was 16 years of age. I had no rights. We lived on the block. The block was our home. The elders looked after us. They kept us safe. We all went out to work. We didn't have a choice. We did cleaning, biscuit factories or whatever job we had to get. We got very little money. I've been in the workforce since I was 14 years old, when I was at home in Walgett, New South Wales, where I come from. I went out to work. I got $5 a week. My kids laugh at me now because they're getting big dollars. They're all educated. And I think education is the key for everybody. It doesn't matter where you come from. And I've travelled a bit now in my senior years. And I'm a foodie. I've lived off the land. I know how to go and find water because my oldies taught me that. I know how to cook our food. I've taken it out there. It's taken me 30 years of my life to get it out there into industry. I'm still doing it. I run a hospitality training school where I teach hospitality to our kids and our adult people, find them employment. That's a big part of it, and Kylie's always been a big support for me and the other people around Nicole. She didn't realise I was here this evening. She was only a young woman, and she's always been a big support to our community, Gail, and everybody sitting up on the panel. So I've seen it all, done it all, but the thing for all Australians to do is to come together, work together to make it happen for our kids to get an education, because in my school, to me, our policy is if you have education, you have a voice, you have a choice. And once they've got that, then we can go out and work together. When I went home to my hometown, I can see the waterways are being clear now and cleaned up, and all the back where we used to grow bush tucker or get it off the riverbeds, or like Uncle said over here, We lived off the land, and I still know how to do that, and I know how to do modern cuisine, so I've been there, done it all. I do own my own catering company as well, so I'm a businesswoman. I do bush tucker. I've taken it to corporate world now with my students. They're all learning that now, so I'm getting it out there. It's a big journey for all of us, but the main thing is we all have to come together and support one another to make it happen. Otherwise it doesn't happen. And while ever we're destroying Mother Earth, taking things out of her, she'll get back at us. All over the world you will see floods, you will see bushfires, you will see droughts, you will see all that. And nobody ever thinks about that. And in Sydney, if you go to Clark Island, you will find fish traps over there if you want to go and have a look. But people don't know that. At the Opera House, that was our fishing place. When I was a 16-year-old girl, we'd go down there and we'd fish. So we'd caught fish there. The pollution in the Sydney Harbour now is shocking. It's destroying the fish, destroying everything. So I've seen it all, I've done it all, but I'm still here. So,
Thank you.
and you young lady, you're right, and Kylie knows it too, because we always say our foods are similar, sweet and sour.
Yes.
And that's the taste and that's the flavour of our food, because Aboriginal people, the only sweets we ever got was the natural honey. And we never ate, we had a healthy diet, and I'm bringing that back into to the young people that I teach, because have to be healthy to survive. And food is the way, so everybody eats, otherwise you don't survive. Thank you.
I wonder whether, Kylie, you might just like to come up as someone who's been an industry leader, and tonight we've eaten some saltbush dumplings, and we've eaten some wallaby, and we've eaten some other things where you really have integrated Indigenous foods into your menus in a very radical and imaginative way. I think you should come up and probably close this evening with a couple of remarks, maybe about how you see things going forward. So would you like to just come up and say something?
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed tonight. I certainly have. Thank you, Auntie Beryl. I love you. I love that dress. It's so cool. And of course, Auntie Beryl and Uncle Max and Gail have been great inspirations to me over many years. In fact, Uncle Max, it's so lovely to be with you tonight. I actually first met Uncle Max about, 11 years ago. And I was on, of all things, an amazing Zen Buddhist retreat one weekend down south, and the teacher was the teacher Zen Roshi Susan Murphy, and of course Uncle Max was co-teaching with Susan that weekend, and that's how I first learnt of Uncle Max. And I remember you took us for an amazing walk into the bush, and that's when I first heard you say that amazing term, the ancient supermarkets. See that fella over there? He'd say, that's what I call the ancient, the ancient bakery. That's the lolly shop and so on. And then who would know that, back in 2010, Joanna Seville, you're here tonight, the amazing Joanna Seville, who was the festival director of the first Sydney International Food Festival. She invited Renee to Australia, Renee Redzepi, who spoke, and that's of course when I became very aware of native ingredients and so on, and rang Mike and Gail the next day, and so the rest is history in terms of how long I've been using Bushfoods at Kylie Kwong. But yes, I've been, when I first discovered native ingredients some 8 years ago, it was, 8 years ago, for me it was like discovering a whole new culinary alphabet. I'd been cooking Cantonese-style food all my life. I'd been, in 2010, I'd been cooking 20 years or so. And to come across the amazing, as you said, Palisa, the amazing, intense, distinct and unique textured and flavoured and aromatic native bush foods was absolutely incredible. It changed my life, it changed my whole way of thinking in the restaurant and the way we do things. And not only was it a culinary experience and explosion, it also made me delve deeper into who I was and where I'd come from, and this amazing country and land. So I won't go any further, but look, I'd really like to thank all of you. Caroline, thank you. It's been a great pleasure to work with you. Uncle Max, Nicole, Palisa, Gail, thank you very much for the effort and for all of the inspiration and the knowledge. Thank you.